this Mercury retrograde is also going to have us rethink so that we can redirect and recalibrate those fine little things so that we're not just jumping blindly into this leap of faith. We're actually jumping into our intention of who do you want to be? What is the leader that you want to be? What does it look like being the hero of your own story? Welcome to Star Powered Astrology for Changemakers. I'm Leslie Tagorda, your guide, a Hawaii-born Filipino Jewish astrologer who loves navigating visionaries like you through the spiritual journey of your work so that you can be inspired to lead by your chart and become the luminary leader you were born to be. Okay. So let's talk about our first Mercury retrograde that we have in 2024. We opened up 2024 within the middle of a Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, and now we are here at Aries season. For the next few Mercury retrogrades that we have in 2024, we're going to be experimenting with fire and then sometimes moving back into earth. But this one is going to be all fire, 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 fire. So in Aries. Now, I love thinking about this Mercury retrograde because it's connecting so many things. It's connecting our eclipses, but it's also connecting us into our upcoming Taurus, Uranus, Jupiter conjunction. And when we think of a Mercury retrograde, all of these planets are moving, or these energies, like the eclipse energy, the Uranus, Jupiter energy, are really momentum moving really quickly forward. But Mercury retrograde is like, hold on. And it's really pulling back a lot of things. And so, even more so, we can feel this really push pull. But I love thinking about this energy that this is the energy that we get to harness so that we can rethink our intentions of where we want to go. If the eclipse season, that Libra lunar eclipse, really showed us the shadows of our unseen shadows of the way we get stuck in the fear of collaboration or the different avenues of people pleasing. But as we move into this Aries solar eclipse, where we are now jumping into the future, we're jumping into the leader that we want to be. Mercury is saying, okay, let's rethink. Let's rethink, what does it mean to be a leader? Let's rethink, what does it mean to take risks. Let's rethink what it means to do this without stress, without fear. And so Mercury here is to slow our mindset down so that we can get really comfortable with taking those leaps of faith forward into the future. So today, I really want to go through what I think this Mercury retrograde is asking of us. I want to look at some of the astrology of this Mercury retrograde to put into context all of the things that are going on. Like Mercury is going to be meeting up with the North Node, with Chiron, with Venus as it does its transits. And what does that mean for us? Now, if you've already been doing some kind of reflections on your upcoming Aries eclipse in terms of what is that leadership you're jumping into, this Mercury retrograde, some of these questions and these reflections and these rethinkings of Mercury retrograde are really going to help you determine what you want in that Aries eclipse season. Also, because on April 20th, Mercury retrograde ends on April 25th, that when we have our big conjunction of Uranus and Jupiter, where we are meant to break through and take that big leap, so many big leap energies that are there for us, this Mercury retrograde is also going to have us rethink so that we can redirect and recalibrate those fine little things so that we're not just jumping blindly into this leap of faith. We're actually jumping into our intention of who do you want to be? What is the leader that you want to be? What does it look like being the hero of your own story? Okay, so I want to share the worksheet. As we think about this Mercury retrograde, I want us to focus on these three big questions. right? We're going to be talking about the phases of the Mercury retrograde. But before we dive in, we know that a Mercury retrograde comes in several phases. It comes in the phase of the shadow as Mercury is moving forward to that spot where it stops and then goes backwards again. And that shadow to me is asking, what holds you back from leading? And I know in our community here, we've been doing that Face Your Fears Eclipse challenge because there are so many fears that come up that prevent us from leading. We're looking at those 10 fears. And if you're listening on the podcast, there was a podcast episode for the eclipse that was talking about the 10 fears that hold you back from leadership. I know for me, fear of criticism or not being good enough prevents me from leading, especially that criticism one, because once you get bigger and once you get more visible or have a bigger platform or you're saying things, there's always going to be somebody that disagrees with you. And ooh, that pain is so painful to me. And so the reason why Mercury shadow asks us and why it's important for us to go deeper into this is so that we can decide to make different choices when we catch ourselves repeating the same patterns, right? The things that all of these fears that people have shared, what are these patterns that, that make us, that stop us from doing the thing that we really want to do, right? Hiding is an easy one. Like that's for me, like just head in the sand, ostriching. Right? I don't want to speak up. I don't show up. And when I don't show up, who does this hurt? This hurts my community. It hurts my family. And so when we start to notice what holds us back from leading, we learn so much from this. We learn how to recognize the pattern. We recognize the opportunities lost. But then we can also start making decisions differently. And the biggest part of facing our fears and doing things differently is accountability. My friends, we cannot do this alone. There's no way we can do this alone. And I absolutely know from personal experience, when things get hard, I don't reach out, I hide. And simply recognizing the hiding or the avoidance can be that lifeline for you. I need help. I'm hiding right now. I need help. I'm avoiding right now. I need help. I'm keeping myself too busy to face other things. And so I want to be that person for you. So please, 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 your invitation to say, I'm feeling like I need to hide. Please help. That's all it needs to be. Okay. So we've been doing this shadow work now for the last few weeks as Mercury has been in the shadow zone, as we've been able to see the unseen with our eclipse. I'm sending you so much love if this is touching you deeply. And now that we've recognized these fears and these shadows, as Mercury steps on its brakes to go forward, Mercury is now asking us, how do you want to redefine your leadership? Right? There are so many ways to be a leader, whatever your style of leadership is. But the important thing that to me defines a leader is one who shows up and contributes their wisdom to the world. Maybe to inspire, maybe to teach, maybe to educate or entertain. Whatever that is, it can be anything. But to be the leader means that you have to show up, you have to share, and you have to get started. So if you're not doing those three things, you're not really being the leader that you were born to be. So when you think about redefining leadership and all the blocks that prevent you from showing up, all the blocks that prevent you from getting started, all the blocks from sharing what you are here to change in the world, that is what this Mercury retrograde is asking of you. So you get a whole few weeks to be able to decide those 3 questions. How do you want to show up? How do you want to share? How do you want to get started? And as we go through the Mercury retrograde and we come towards the end, at the middle of Mercury retrograde, we have the combust, when Mercury meets the sun in the middle of the sky. And then Mercury travels and goes all the way to the post shadow. This is now asks you, okay, you redefined what your leadership wants to look like. Now, this Mercury combust plus our eclipse is now going to ask you, what kind of hero do you want to be? You are the hero to your own story. As we discussed when we were looking at all the face your fears, we all noticed that our block was ourselves. And our hero will also be ourselves. And so this Mercury retrograde is going to show you what kind of hero you want to be. So as we start this Mercury retrograde, I've talked about the significance about reactivating your leadership because we are in the midst of the eclipse season. And what I want to reiterate is that the timing, what is clear about the timing is that fear, anxiety, stress is on high alert for all of us right now. And this happens when you are faced with doing something wrong, when you're faced with failing, with you're faced with uncertainty or the unknown. But we are at the start, the dawn of a new way of being. I think we can all feel this, where this is the darkest before the light comes. And as you step into that hero to take charge and to lead, you're taking action and initiating, not because you lack fear, but because you know that doing right is more important than hiding. And what I mean doing right is sharing your wisdom. So as we think about who I am, let's talk a little bit about the astrology of this Mercury retrograde. Okay, let's start with station retrograde. We are 45 minutes away from the station retrograde. This is a chart that is cast from San Francisco. So don't mind the house system if you're not in San Francisco. But you can see that Mercury stops on the brakes at 27 degrees retrograde. It's mostly unaspected at this time, except for a wide conjunction to Chiron that is still close to the North Node. The sun is catching up, so we have this Aries stellium. Now, the ruler, Mars, is making its way towards Saturn for this Pisces stellium here. Earlier, we were talking about feeling at this time of that station retrograde of feeling kind of weighted down. I absolutely see Mercury in Aries as a train. It is moving really, really fast. I always think of it as a freight train, and I know that there's really no symbolism for this right now, but this freight train is like full of like the postal service, right? All these messages, all of these letters and parcels, and it's just moving so fast because it needs to get all of these communications to where it needs to go. But this train is like one of those old, heavy steam trains, and it's chugging along, and all of a sudden it sees that it needs to take a bend, it needs to go around the corner, and it needs to slow down, or it has like a red signal, it needs to stop. And when a train is moving that fast, like it is in Aries, Mercury in Aries wants to go fast. It's quick thinking, lightning thoughts, right? To ask Mercury in Aries to slow down is not an easy feat for any of us. If you are a beholder of a Mercury in Aries natally, you know how fast your thoughts are. You know how fast you want to go and get things done and accomplish all the things. This is the energy that all of us are feeling right now. And for this Mercury in Aries to be coming to a complete stop, you can feel the wheels on the train that are just like sparking because they're like slowing down the weight of this huge train. And it just feels like, are we going to stop? Are we going to stop? Are we going to stop? Are we going to derail? Right? And so it can feel really heavy and really intense. Now, interestingly, with this Mercury retrograde lasts for 24 days, all the way to the 25th. And notice that Mercury goes back to 15 degrees of Aries. So it's 27 degrees where it started. And then when it ends, it goes to 15 degrees. And so that is not very big, not a very far distance traveled for a typical Mercury retrograde. A typical Mercury retrograde, Mercury can go back about 19 degrees or so. And this one, it's only going back 12 degrees and for 24 days. An average Mercury retrograde lasts 3 weeks, 21 days. So this one is a little bit longer than normal and traveling a much shorter distance. So we have an ultra slow moving Mercury, right? This tells us that Mercury is moving slower than normal because Mercury can go really, really, really fast. It's going slower than normal and it's transiting a very short distance in the zodiac. What do you think this means that Mercury is moving so slowly and like an extra long time, 24 days, but only traveling 12 degrees backwards?
I feel like it means when we come out of Mercury, like it's just going to be like this propelling ourselves forward. Like I feel like it's just going to be a whoosh, like that suction's all created because we're rethinking, reworking, and then all of a sudden it's just going to be this catapult in a good way, not in a bad way, but it's like, here we go. Okay.
I love that vision, right? Like, because everything else in the sky is moving so fast with the eclipses and the Uranus Jupiter conjunction. Everything is like quantum leaping, like we're in the middle of this wormhole, but we're kind of in this like little protected capsule, like in slow motion. Almost like we have to figure this part out before we can be catapult. And Cassandra says like the pullback of an arrow or a slingshot, right? That kind of that tension that is created. And Monica says revise and review, go slow. Yeah. So this one portion of our chart, the 12 degrees between Aries of 27 degrees and Aries of 15 degrees, is where we are being asked to revise, review, and go slow. Of course, when we have our eclipse at 19 degrees of Aries on April 8th, 19 degrees, right where Chiron is right now, that's right in that area. And that Chiron eclipse is asking us, what kind of vulnerable leader do we want to be? So the themes of this Mercury retrograde are truly supporting our eclipse energy. Okay, so the one last chart I want to show you is just a couple things. So as we approach the end of Mercury retrograde, when it gets back to that 15 degrees, it will be conjunct the North Node. Now Mercury is going to be connecting with that North Node 3 times. It did back in March 18th, then again on March 25th. So it started and ended with this North Node. When I said March 18th, that was actually our when Mercury entered the shadow zone. Okay, so it entered and exits the whole transiting path of this Mercury retrograde with that North Node. What do you suspect it means to have that North Node bookends, about rethinking about how we're going to reignite our leadership? What does that feel like? Conjunct the North Node of our soul's purpose.
I feel like I've been grieving, like an ending and a beginning kind of feeling is how I have been experiencing this, all of the beginnings. I'm in a lot of transition myself. So, I mean, that makes sense for me, but it does kind of, that's what I'm experiencing, I guess.
Yeah, so maybe like for you with the North Node, if we think about it as our soul purpose and soul potential, maybe a new soul purpose and new potential is being rewritten for you. And that grieving is part of that process to move forward, saying goodbye to the old parts, maybe the met or the unmet expectations that we had in that previous version, that we can free ourselves as we jump into this next purpose, right? We can change our purpose. Where you are here now is not the same place you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Your needs, your desires, your wants, your ambitions have changed. So start to think about what has changed in your soul purpose. What are the new possibilities waiting for you? Okay, now with also we have a conjunction with Chiron. Mercury conjuncts Chiron 3 times during its complete cycle, in the pre-shadow on March 20th, during Mercury retrograde on April 15th, and then we have it on May 5th when Mercury leaves the shadow zone. Okay. And we know that Chiron is always at its core asking, is it safe? Chiron, the wounded leader, asks us to share our wounds, the gifts that we and skills that we've learned from Chiron, sharing them as our gift of contribution. And so Chiron, to me, through Mercury retrograde, is asking, is it safe to speak my ideas? As we were unveiling the fear, all of our different fears, fear of rejection, fear of being good enough, fear of criticism, fear of failure, how that silences us. And so part of us really rethinking this Mercury retrograde and harnessing and diving deep, looking at, when haven't I spoken up? Then looking at, how will I start to speak up? What have I learned from not sharing my voice? What have I gained? What have I lost? And then now, who's going to benefit from me speaking up? Lastly, when we come towards the end of our Mercury retrograde, Mercury will be connecting with Venus on almost towards the very end of the Mercury retrograde on April 19th. And to me, when we are meeting with Venus in Aries, these are other leaders. These are our people who take lead with us. And guess what? These are our allies that are going to help you become accountable on your heroine's journey. These are the people that need to hear your stories. These are the people that you are here to serve as a leader. And so I find it so beautiful, so apropos that Venus comes in at the very end and she says, okay, who are your allies? Who are you advocating for? Your allies to reach out and say, hey, I'm going through a cycle of hiding. I need help. Hey, there's people that need to hear your story. I need help to advocate. And so who will your people be? And so for this Mercury retrograde, I want you to take into account the North Node. What does this purpose mean? Are you rewriting a new purpose? I want you to consider Chiron. Is it safe to speak your ideas? Who needs to hear what you have to say? Who benefits when you are silent? Mercury conjunct Venus at the very end of the Mercury retrograde. Who are my leadership allies that will keep me accountable? Who am I here to advocate for? Right? Notice these questions, I pose it both inwards, like what do we need, but also like who needs what we have. Part of this, there's 7 things that we can do during this Mercury retrograde, although I feel like you have more than enough already just thinking about those big questions that we started with. We get to reassert how you want to be seen as a leader. You get to reactivate how you want to initiate and take action. You get to restore your confidence and bravery. You get to respond to anxiety and fear. You get to reawaken emotional security for your own risk taking. You get to reveal your voice to advocate your truth. And you get to redefine your leadership as part of your soul purpose. Cassandra says, this is happening right over my sun and Mercury, and my nervous system is low-key panicking right now. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having this on your sun and your sun and your Mercury, and then this is also the eclipse is going to be impacting this energy right now. Your nervous system is getting ready for that big leap. There's like, you're having like this, like when you have like a systems upgrade for your computer and you're like, oh shit, do I have to upgrade now? Is this going to crash everything? But you do it anyway because everything else was broken. It wasn't working. So you have to do the upgrade. Like, this is what's happening for you. Like your fingers in the socket, you are just like upgrading right now. So practice your tools, your tapping, your breathing, your yoga, whatever you need, right? This is a time to really practice your self-regulation tools. What I want you to look for to see how this works in your natal chart, I want you to take a look at the area of your natal chart between 27 degrees of Aries and 15 degrees of Aries. What's in Aries right now is the Sun, North Node, Chiron, and Mercury. So all of those are in Aries right now. Sun isn't quite at that 15 degree mark yet. It will be very soon, in 3 days, but we have North Node, Chiron, and Mercury all within this zone. So what I want you to look at is I want you to see the house, primarily the house that is being transited by this area, because that shows you where in your life and your work and your leadership that you are meant to rethink your leadership, right? The Aries eclipse is going to be right there. So if you already started looking at where Aries of 19 degrees is, where that eclipse is, that whole part of your chart is being ultra activated right now. So, focusing in on the area that's going to be impacted, focusing in on if you have planets that are in that range of Aries of 27 to 15, knowing that those planetary processes want some rethinking, recalibration, like how have those processes been working or not working, right? So the moon, how have you been working with your emotions or hiding them? With your sun, how have you been showing off your brilliance or not? With your rising, how have you been taking the lead and guiding or not, right? Chiron, how have I been sharing my true vulnerabilities and wounds? The other thing, if it's not too complicated, you can take a look at planets that you might have in Libra that is opposite this area. Those planets will also kind of be competing for energy with you at this time. And what I mean competing for energy, it's like you might have like a family member who is represented by one of those planets that are like, I need this from you. And you're like, no, I don't want that. And then the squares in Cancer or Capricorn in that same area, those are planets that are going to be kind of like, I like to call this like, kind of poking the bear. But focusing mostly on the Aries and Libra. If you want to pull in Capricorn and Cancer, go for it. But if that feels overwhelming, simply come back to those initial questions of what holds you back from being a leader? How do you want to redefine your leadership? And what kind of hero do you want to be? If you can answer those 3 big questions, this Mercury retrograde, you have been using this energy perfectly. As a human design projector, my energy shines more brightly because of people like you who share my work. If you enjoy this podcast and want to help build a movement of innovative astrology and leadership and spark the intuitive revolution, please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, or better yet, share this podcast with your change-making besties. We will all shine brighter together as we create the future we want to see.